Fantastic discussion around human rights and sports role as COVID has changed things so dramatically, and sports need to step up. And later on, we'll be talking about purposeful leadership and action. And then we have a session on individual growth, resilience, and reframing stress, something I think we all can connect to at the moment. There's some interactive breakout sessions on the way as well. Please pick and choose what relevant sessions you want to join. We are delighted to welcome you. If you're just joining us this week, welcome to you. If you've been with us for a few sessions now, thank you for your engagement. It's been a pleasure having you at Workshop Week. This platform really does support connections and networking. And if you can see off onto the right-hand side, you will see our chat group, chat function. Please feel free to give your views, questions, applaud our partners and our speakers as they go through, and please share things that you're doing in the space as well. The great advantage of us doing this digitally is we don't have that awkwardness of staring at someone's navel or their name tag as you chase them around the coffee area trying to network. You can see them off onto the right there. You can click and chat with someone, or you can either go into a private chat room to network, and you can request a video call. Fantastic stuff. If you're having difficulty with the platform, the incredibly reliable Ben Freeman is on that channel and happy to answer any queries. If it's a particular problem, the Hopin tech team is there. Please click the small blue smiley face box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and they will come on and support you. We've had some important discussions over the last couple of days and more to come. Please share them across your social media. BYS Workshop Week is the hashtag, and please tag in @BeyondSport. We'd love to hear from you. The panel we've got now is Purpose-Driven Partnerships, the Future of Sports Sponsorship. Our industry and the organizations around it are fueled by media rights, they're fueled by corporate partnerships and sponsorship and ticket sales, and these trickle down through our system quite dramatically, funding a lot of what we all do. So from the smallest NGO to the heavy of heavyweights, major global events, the World Cup and the Olympics, few of us are disconnected from sponsorship. We're all engaged in corporate partnerships in some shape or form. So this panel will explore how one major corporation is changing how it engages with sport. Then on the flip side, we're going to get to talk to three key rights holders and their different points of their purpose journey and how they're adapting to manage the complexity of today's sporting and working world. So we kick off with SAP and their partners, the WTA and World Sailing. And this session will unpack their successful partnerships and why now purpose seems to be at the heart of it and so vital to sports large investors moving forward. After this session, you'll have an opportunity to take part in workshops to unpack your own problems around your own partnerships and your own worries around the changes that are happening, and think beyond. The consultancy of Beyond Sport will be there to support you, also with the Third Wind Group. So we're looking forward to those. But we start with SAP. SAP have hugely invested in sport, big investors, and are one of the leading corporations in getting involved in sport. They provide technology into our industry, but more importantly, in many ways, they're a leading corporation over promoting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I'd like to welcome someone who's going to give us a whirlwind tour of how SAP engage with sport and their partners. So please welcome Vivek Papet, Senior Vice President of Purpose and Brand Experience at SAP.
It's a pleasure to be here and share with you some of our thoughts on I think what you just discussed, which is the role of sponsorships, particularly in the sports arena, at such a pivotal time in our history. I'm going to try to speak to three things here. Number one, as you mentioned, why is purpose more important now than ever before? So just talk a little bit about what's happening from both a macro as well as a micro perspective around the world. I'll share some ideas around how we construct the SAP strategy around purpose, and then how that actually manifests itself into the types of relationships that we look for and the types of investments that we make. And then I'll talk about maybe 2 or 3 examples of how these investments actually come to life, both in the short term as well as in the long term moving forward. So just on the very first point, which is, why is purpose such an important topic now more than ever before? I think you have to just turn on any aspect of the news and look at what is happening around us. So obviously, as you know, we are right in the middle of a pandemic. We've maybe in some cases just gone through the first wave, but there's already a threat of a second wave coming. And, obviously, because of the pandemic, the entire world of how we live and how we play has been turned upside down. On top of that, I think, as you saw over the last 2 or 3 weeks, especially within the United States, you've seen really, I think, some of the very deep fractures associated with racial injustice, social injustice flare up, and an entirely new movement that is spawned in terms of correcting some of these deep-rooted issues. Now, while those are the most important issues at the moment, there are some huge areas that have, or issues that have not gone away. So if you look at climate change, the urgency to act around climate change has not gone away. For instance, in May, we found out that there were higher levels of concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, more than ever recorded in human history over the last 3 million years. So it's a crisis that needs to be addressed. The problem hasn't gone away. Similarly, when we look at the world's supply chains that are being asked to become more and more resilient and flexible at the same time, we know there's close to 100 billion of raw materials that enter the supply chain on an annual basis, but only 8.6% of these materials are actually reused. So there's an enormous amount of waste that is created. And frankly, the world has not figured out what to do with this waste, and we create more issues related to dumping and so on and so forth. Finally, I think on the skills gap, there are lots of new technologies coming, particularly in the area of automation and artificial intelligence, and the threat of traditional jobs that provided employment to millions of people, that threat continues to grow at a very, very fast pace. In fact, more and more employers, despite the crisis, are reporting that they just don't have enough people and the skills that they need to fill some of the jobs that they foresee in the future. So long story short, I think both with some of the short-term issues that we are seeing, the longer-term problems that I just mentioned, we're living in a really complex, interdependent, and fragile world, and most of the problems associated with this world cannot be solved by a single entity. So what we believe is that today purpose is more relevant to brands than ever before. From an SAP perspective, and I talk on behalf of many of our customers as well that we engage with, what we see is that more and more brands cannot afford to sit on the fence on many of these issues any longer. They have to take a position, and the market's going to reward them or hurt them for taking that position. So you can't just afford to sit on the fence. You have to be an activist in some regard on many of these issues that I just outlined. So it's a defining moment in our history, and everybody's asking for it. Employees ask for it, customers are asking for it, consumers are asking for it, and really the whole aspect of a company or a brand existing to serve the needs of just their shareholders has gone away, and it's really looking at the entire stakeholder ecosystem that we serve. So that's really where I believe that purpose is becoming more significant and more important than ever before. So now let's talk a little bit about how does SAP look at purpose, and what is our purpose? How do we actually try to bring it to life? Our purpose, which was established many, many years ago, several decades ago, was to help the world run better, and we did so by helping businesses run better. And by extension, when we help businesses run better and we help the world run better, we are also in the business of improving people's lives. So the purpose and vision of SAP is to help the world run better and improve people's lives. And the way that we do it, we think about it in 2 ways. One of them is as an exemplar, which is what is it that we can do as a company in order to serve the purpose and vision. And a lot of this has manifested itself over the last many years in terms of the types of investments we make within our workforce, in the types of investments that we make around some of the some of the technologies that we create. For instance, we were one of the first few companies that actually created a formal sustainability report that was packaged along with our financial annual reports in 2009. And so we've been doing this for over 10 years as an exemplar of sustainability. We'll try to, make sure that we're just as engaged on the issues related to climate change, circular economy, and so on and so forth. The bigger opportunity, however, is for us to serve our purpose and vision in the role of an enabler. And what do we mean by that? What we mean by that is by serving the needs of our customers all around the world, businesses of all sizes and magnitude and scale. If we can help them achieve their purpose and vision, then what we've got is an exponential network effect, right? And so we think of achieving our purpose and vision through the exemplar role, which is what do we do as a company, and then as an enabler role, which is how do we serve the needs of our clients all around the world. And so from a strategy perspective, when we look at our strategy, I can put it to you in this way. It's basically, how do we achieve shared purpose through shared value creation with our customers and our partners, of which obviously some of the sponsorships are part of it. How do we create shared purpose through shared value creation with our customers and partners at network scale? And the reason why network scale is important is we are in 180 countries. We serve close to 500,000, 450,000 plus customers worldwide. We have an employee base of 100,000 colleagues that represent 150 different nationalities. And we have a huge partner system of more than 30,000 companies. So one of the things that makes SAP very unique in this regard is just the ability to actually orchestrate what we call a purpose network, right? So we feel like we're in an enormous position of influence and privilege to do so. So what we did, in fact, I just took on this role in March, where obviously we had a very strong purpose and vision. What we tried to do was to actually formalize a strategy around that purpose and vision, where we said, let's look at where we are going to be the most relevant from an engagement perspective with our technologies, because really co-innovation and technology is the underpinning aspect of our vision and purpose. How can we then reach the types of customers and the consumers that they serve? Because we're a B2B company, we don't necessarily always reach consumers, but we reach them through our clients and our customers. So how do we actually reach those markets and consumers in the right way through our customers and partners? And how do we do so at scale? And so what we tried to do was build a strategy around the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we focused on a few specific things that we believe would have the most impact in terms of how we wanted to serve the vision and purpose of the company. That's not to say that the others that were not in focus were not important, but we felt that by serving just a few of these core areas, 5 specific topics, for instance, diversity and inclusion, social and inclusive entrepreneurship, digital skills and closing the skills gap, climate action, and enabling the circular economy. Those were the 5 focus areas that we decided we really wanted to go after, and we really had to take a very strong position on. There are some other issues related to, for instance, emerging topics like mental health in the workplace, as well as AI, data governance, and ethics and trust. These are also issues that we care about. We said, let's focus on these 5+2 areas as the key focus areas for the company. And by virtue of focusing on those, we believe that there's going to be a bowling pin effect where we will actually solve some of the other problems related to the other UN Sustainable Development Goals, such as poverty and so on and so forth. So this is kind of the strategy that we created. And when you look at some of the sponsorships investments, particularly in sports as well as in other fields, we're basically using our strategy to guide those investments. So what do we look for in a partner? Number one, Do they share about the same causes, and do they have the same kind of purpose orientation as I just mentioned? So, for instance, is a particular partner interested in circular economy? Are they interested in climate change, and how do we work together? Right. So there's the concept of shared purpose. The second aspect, which is an important differentiator for us, is can we actually co-create new solutions using technology as a mechanism? So the idea of shared purpose and shared co-creation is super important. And then the third aspect, as I mentioned, is can we do it at network scale? So can we actually come up with something that is meaningful, that's different, that's relevant, and helps improve the lives and experiences of millions of people that we collectively serve? Now, that's kind of the strategy, just to give you a background on what the strategy is and how we actually look at the investments and what types of filters do we apply. And I think, in terms of how we apply that strategy in terms of execution, I'll give you a few examples. One example is with World Sailing. World Sailing is the world governing body in the sport of sailing. What do they care about the most? They care about sustainability. This is very, very important to us. And so whether it is something related to trying to reduce waste in the oceans, particularly related to plastics, for instance, we believe that when we partner with World Sailing, we have an opportunity to understand what are some of the big problems happening around this particular issue, and then begin to deploy certain solutions in order to solve that particular problem. Now, traditionally, obviously, what we will continue to do is to build specific applications that help on race management. We provide sailing analytics. We have something called an SAP Live Center, which is created to enable fans to get included into the sport and understand really what's happening during these races, as well as look at competitive head-to-head situations. So those, to me, are additional things that we would co-develop with a partner, which we've done with World Sailing, right? The other aspect of it is we have a relationship on the sailing side with Emily Penn, who is a world-renowned oceanographer and researcher who's trying to understand how do we actually save the oceans from plastic? 5 trillion tons of plastic in the ocean. How do we actually fix this problem? And so what we've just released actually on June 8th, which was World Ocean Day, is a new platform that was co-created with Emily Penn called Shift.how. And if you go to the platform as a consumer, what you'll be able to see is a guided tour on taking specific micro actions or macro actions, in terms of trying to do your part in fixing the problem. The entire platform is based upon our Qualtrics solution. So there's a technology aspect that we get to enable and basically portray and position in front of the customers and consumers who are going to use the platform. So there's a benefit for us, but we are solving a much bigger issue on this particular topic. So if you get a chance after this presentation, Shift.how, check it out, and you'll get a chance to see what you can do in order to solve this particular issue. Another partnership who we'll be talking with is the Women's Tennis Association. And this has been a partner for us, with us actually for over 7 years now. We entered into a relationship with the WTA in 2013, and we've steadily built many, many different solutions with the WTA. Why the WTA? Well, it's the most recognized women's sports organization worldwide. Clearly, from a D&I perspective, it allows us to really reach an audience that we potentially would not be able to reach at that scale, right? Now, with the WTA, we have created specific applications at tournaments. There's 9 tournaments that are hosted by the WTA where we are absolutely integrated as part of the tournament activity. We've created specific applications using analytics to help coaches identify patterns of play and actually, come up with recommendations in what the strategy might be for a particular player competing against a particular opponent. So there's tons of this type of applications, co-creation, co-innovation that we've done with the WTA. And like I said, because we've been in a relationship with them since 2013, we've basically mapped up to the times of change happening within the world of tennis itself, but also looking at some of the causes that the WTA actually cares about, particularly related to diversity and inclusion. And we do it at network scale because of the representation all over the world. Maybe just to close off, perhaps a non-traditional sponsorship is in the arena of esports. It's a new sport. It's growing, in popularity globally. So what we've done is we've entered into a relationship with Team Liquid, which is one of the most recognizable teams within the esports arena. It's also a media company. They boast up to 60 athletes that are world-class, hyper-competitive, super competitive in 14 top games that that are represented within this particular arena. And what's important for us as part of this engagement, again, is it's such a data-intensive sport. There's so much data happening in the course of how these games are played that we are able to actually demonstrate how our technology harnesses all of this data in real time and actually adds value to the players, to the coaches, to help on recruiting, as well as to the fans. So I think when you look at it in total, we look for, does the organization have a sense of shared values that we care about mutually? Can we actually co-create and develop something from a technological perspective that is relevant and it adds actually value to everybody, including the fans, the coaches, the orchestration of operations, and so forth. And then finally, do we reach the right types of audiences at scale that we care about? So just to summarize, I think, as I said earlier, purpose has never been more important than it is today. And brands can no longer afford to sit on the fence on many of these issues. In fact, customers, employees, stakeholders are pushing brands to take active positions, as you've seen, for instance, related to what's happening with Black Lives Matter. And SAP is very strong in this regard as well. So it's a super important, critical moment in our history. The second one is we believe that whenever we engage with partners, particularly in the sports arena, given the type of scale that sports has, we do so with a sense of shared purpose, with shared value creation, and making sure that we are reaching the right audiences. And I think as we put this strategy to life, what you'll see is that we have a huge portfolio of investments across the entire company. But at every given point in time, we extend the relationships. We've been partners with many of these organizations for many, many years, but we are also not afraid of bringing in new partners based upon some of the attributes that I just described. So with that, Nick, hopefully that was helpful to your audiences, and let me turn it back over to you.
Vivek, absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. That was a complete whirlwind tour, but you really covered a lot of ground there, and I love that. And you did reinforce it yourself, which is that shared value, shared purpose, the relevance, the co-creation, and a sense of meaningfulness between the relationship. And what I love about what you've just talked about is how much value you look to add through your technology into the relationship. So thank you for that. That was absolutely superb. I assume everyone will be applauding you in the chat group at the moment. So that was fantastic. So look, can I welcome now, we've got some other guests joining. Can I welcome Catherine? I think they're going to pop up on my screen now, which will be great. Here we go. We're going to welcome Catherine Regan, Vice President of Partnerships at the WTA. I can see Scott Over, Commercial Director of World Sailing. And I'm hoping Claire Furlong will be joining us, General Manager, Marketing Communications from the International Cricket Council. Welcome all of you. How are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Lovely to see you. So guys, I'm going to start off just following on where Vivek has been engaging about the partnerships with World Sailing and with the WTA. Can you just give us a little bit of insight over how that partnership approach, and I'll start with you, Scott, how that partnership approach has manifested itself with SAP and how it feels different maybe to other partnerships you've got?
Well, I think the partnership originated through tracking. So sailing as a sport is typically difficult to follow, especially if you're on the land and all you see is boats going in different directions. It's not a linear sport in that you just run the 100 meters from start to finish. At a start line, the boats go off in different directions, and typically some of the best insights is just knowing the leaderboard, and that never existed before SAP coming on board. So a live leaderboard gives an insight that was never previously available. So what would have happened is the race would have started, and then you only know the result when the sailors come in and tell you, I won, which from a sporting perspective is super, super tricky. So having that insight was the main starting mechanism for our relationship with SAP and SAP's involvement in sailing. But since then, and with the whole purpose direction, purpose is a word that I'd never used until about a year and a half ago. I used what we were doing at World Sailing in an individual perspective. So sustainability or gender equality or human rights, etc., etc. I would use them in isolation. Whereas now, under that umbrella, we're using SAP in loads of different ways, specifically around technology. So last year they acquired Qualtrics, which is and I hope you don't mind me describing this, but it's like a turbocharged Survey Monkey. And so what that allowed us to do is to do really large analysis of our audience, our sailors and our stakeholders to get an insight into really key areas such as women in sailing. So we did a strategic review of women in sailing that would not have been possible without that technology, or it might have been possible, but the actual data would not be as constructive, and we wouldn't have been able to do such a vast global survey. So now we have a warts and we believe with regards to gender equality and women in sailing. So we've got all different types of stakeholders feeding into that survey, so we can really expose what we have now and where we want to be in the future.
Where are you in that process at the moment? Have you galvanized into action, or is it you're still collecting the data at the moment?
No, we've published the report. The survey is available, and also it's because World Sailing is essentially an international federation. It's a political organization, and it needs to flow into our governance structure. So a lot of the recommendations from the World Sailing Women in Sailing strategic review now impacts our governance. So these recommendations are having to be put into our day-to-day, both from a competition point of view, but also from number of board members or allocation of roles, etc. One of the big things that there's a big difference between Olympic sailing and sailing in general. So Olympic sailing, we've got 4 mixed classes. So it's the most mixed sport in the Olympic Games, and we have equal participation across all disciplines. But take aside from Olympic sailing, it's a very different world, and it's heavily male dominated. And how is it that we get to change that? So the review actually came up with recommendations based on the survey, and we could have only done that because of the quality of data that we got. So some of it is objective and statistical, and a lot of it is subjective. And it's a combination of the two that allows us to create an informed decision to move our sport forward. And it took a long time for me to figure that out. But if I can figure out how to use it, then anyone can really.
Well, lovely, Catherine. One of the problems you don't have is getting too many women involved in the WTA. So you don't need to do that research with SAP. So how's it manifested itself for you? How's that relationship with SAP been different from your other partnerships and provided a context for that added co-creation to happen?
Yeah. So for us, having a shared purpose was really the foundation of our partnership with SAP. And like Vivek mentioned, it started in 2013. And that shared purpose was about improving the sport of tennis and really enhancing the experience for the fans. And we wanted to do that from the very beginning. And so what we did was actually create tennis analytics for coaches. And in order to do that, the WTA had to be fully committed and actually change a rule to allow on-court coaching to make that possible. And so we've actually never done something like that before, and we haven't done it since, where we've actually changed a rule for our sport in order to really deploy this technology that's actually changed our game. So we launched that in 2015. We took that to the next level in 2017, launching tennis analytics for media. So really taking the same strategy, the real-time in-match insights, bringing them to first the coaches, then the media. And then what we've done since then is really try to look at ways to improve that. So 2018, we did a coaches media day where we're really getting our coaches out there to be brand evangelists and really talk about what SAP has done for the sport, and they're authentic ambassadors to be able to say, like, this is what they've done for us and how they've transformed the game. In 2019, Vivek mentioned this, but we launched a patterns of play. So really kind of taking that real-time insights to the next level and saying, how can we get an in-depth view of what these insights can do beyond just the, in the moment, like how can we further analyze whether it's court service or a particular competitor, and really giving coaches the opportunity to kind of take it to the next level. So we've worked hand in hand with SAP. A lot of that's been technology that we've developed together. And we couldn't have done that without the foundation, like we said, that the shared purpose, the shared vision, making sure that we are nimble, we're flexible, willing to adapt. And, we really have gone into this together. And for 7 years, we collaborate, we do it all hand in hand. And they've been great partners.
That sounds amazing, guys. But and this is really a question to two of you. Claire, I'll come to you in just 2 seconds. But when you're measuring the success of your partnership together, how are you looking at the KPIs and the metrics around social delivery and social impact? Are you saying at the beginning, are you setting that out at the beginning, look, we know what the business objectives are, because they're very clear. We know there's some co-creation. Are you setting your targets around social impact at the very beginning, and how are we going to measure this? Are you taking a kind of direct approach? Do you want to answer that, or are we best to start with the rights holders here?
Yeah, shall I take that one?
Yeah, of course.
I think for us, the purpose journey, or especially the focus on sustainability, started around 3 or 4 years ago, where we saw almost a carrot and a stick situation, where us as an organization were and are typically educated with regards to the environment, because the water is our playground. So if the water is dirty, or if there is no wind, or if the climate is changing so that our race course doesn't exist anymore, that's going to have a huge impact on us. So we always had that feeling, but to create a strategy, so we created a Sustainable Agenda 2030, which has 59 goals that we're setting out to achieve by 2030, and it ties in with not all of the SDGs, but a lot of them, and that got ratified by our council. So it now means that we actually have to do it, and I think that we want to be an enabler and a role model for our athletes, but also for all our stakeholders. But to do that, we need the amplification and the partnerships of organizations like SAP to help us to scale, and to do that on a much larger global way, but also NGOs. So we've partnered with UN Women, we've partnered with UN Oceans, we've partnered with UN Environment, all to get quality and clear advice. And I think that for me, we already have a lot of natural assets as a sport that we need to use. So Emily Penn is a great example of someone who is an expert that we need to lean on. but our sport is filled with those experts, and pooling them together to form our sustainability committee was one of the first steps to then develop the strategy that we now use.
Fantastic. Sounds really impressive. Claire, thank you for joining us. Just tell us recently, the ICC has been updating its social impact framework. Tell us a little bit about that, but also tell us how you might engage your partners and stakeholders in that discussion. And it's an interesting thing. We're speaking to three, what I'd imagine, quite traditional sports at the moment, but it seems like you're all along some ways along an innovation journey at the moment. And so for an organisation like the ICC, this must be quite a journey.
Yeah, it is, and we're listening to Scott and to Catherine here. We're at the early stages of our journey on this, but that makes it very, very exciting. I mean, we have a huge platform, 1.2 billion fans around the world, and fundamentally that's why commercial partners want to get involved with us. But increasingly, what they've been asking is, well, what is cricket's purpose? And that wasn't something that 12, 18 months ago we could really answer. We had well-meaning programs framed around our global events. We had a partnership with UNICEF, but all it was we gave them the platform of our global events, and there was no defined objectives there. And for each mini program around each global event, we'd approach our partners for their support, but it was very short term, and it didn't enable either them or us to build a narrative or any long-term measurable impact. So we were firmly in that kind of tick box bracket of, we have a global event, we should be seen to be doing the right thing, but it wasn't particularly meaningful. And there was no real strategy to how do we harness the power of that 1.2 billion fans to do social good, if you like, and then drive social impact. So we undertook a review of what we do. Firstly, what was our purpose as a sport? And from that, we've started to build out a framework with a number of clear objectives. And one of them is to use social impact to drive our overarching commercial objectives. So rather than working with our partners on an ad hoc basis, event by event, or we're doing this, or this is our cause of the day, if you like, we want to partner with them now to drive genuine social impact through cricket and make it an integral part of the partnership. So we're no longer looking at providing the platform to tick the box. It's about creating partnerships and creating value for multiple stakeholders. So the sport, our members, the communities in which we're operating, and of course the commercial partners. So we want them to be much more authentic, rather than we're coming into a country and we must do something there and then we'll leave and we'll do nothing ever again and then we go to another country. We want it to have much more longevity. We want it to have cricket outcomes, because this is about our sport as well as driving a social impact. So it's about now working on a longer term basis. And it was great to hear Vivek talk about sharing the same causes, because our new framework is, as you would expect, aligned to the SDGs. And we will now start working with partners to say, well, what are your specific interests? How can we align better and create a program that is over the longer term, that supports both of our shared objectives and creates an impact. So that's going to be our approach from now on, and having those shared causes and working with them over the longer term, so we can drive meaningful change.
I tell you what, Vivek, I don't know if you're feeling a little buzz here, but we're sitting here with three rights holders that really seem to be understanding the power of a shared value approach, that we can, where you talk about kind of co-creating, there's business impact here as well as social. How important is that piece to make sure that we tick off that it's not just social, that it's business as well at the same time? Is that something that you feel is very important?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them, in my estimation, they're both equally important. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's now more than ever before that we have to take a stance and a position on certain issues, right? And so I think for a long time, on the social impact, brands would sit on the fence and take a neutral stance on some of these key issues, right? And you cannot afford to do that anymore. And so you're seeing that happen specifically with Black Lives Matter, in which many brands have now come out and basically stated a position, very clear position on that. At the same time, given the fact that we are a technology brand, what is sort of the secret sauce that we bring to the table that nobody else can, right? And so if we were a consumer products company, we would have a different value proposition. But we are a technology company. And what we try to do is we believe that actually with engagements through World Sailing, with the WTA, we're able to actually advance our technology much faster than we might be able to through traditional engagement with B2B customers, right? So for us, it's, yes, the social impact is super important, but we also look at it as we're not just creating value, but we are actually advancing the state of our technology. So whether it's analytics, I love the example, Scott, that you brought up about Qualtrics, which was used to create this new platform around Shift.how. It's really, for us, it's not just co-innovation, but it's really accelerating what we would not be able to accelerate through traditional engagements and partnerships. Right? So that, I hope that gives you a little more sort of color on what it is that we look for. It goes well beyond just sort of, here's some package solution, go use it and implement it. It's really the spirit of how do we advance technologies and bring it into much more consumer user-friendly applications that we might not be able to get to through traditional means.
It sounds like a huge opportunity for sport, and it's very clear that the organisations themselves want to be more purposeful, but it sounds like we're such a easy context to bring corporates and help them understand how they can deliver on purpose as well. Catherine, one of the things we've seen in the last couple of weeks, and you may not know of a gentleman called Marcus Rashford, who's an England footballer who persuaded the government in the last week to roll back on school meals and school lunches during the holidays. But you've certainly seen the power of Colin Kaepernick and the power of individual partners. The WTA has this wonderful connection with athletes that play as individuals, very much so. How do you see sponsorship responding to what we're saying, which is this very clear, powerful voice of athletes at the moment that really seem to be really having an impact? And sometimes where there has been a vacuum of leadership, and we're seeing organizations lead like SAP, etc., but we're also seeing athletes fill the gap at the moment. Are you excited by that prospect? You've got a number of kind of leading athletes already that are very vocal, but you must be just thinking, what a great opportunity at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, as you know about the WTA, we were, founded, women's tennis has been founded over 50 years ago, and we have stood on the foundation of equality, and that is the basis of our sport and where we are. That's how we got to where we are today. And so for us, there's no room for discrimination of any kind, whether it's gender, race, religion, sexual preference, whatever it is. There's no room for discrimination. And so having athletes that have been very vocal, like you mentioned, and have been leaders, we can't be more supportive or proud to say that they are using their voice to be leaders and to really make an impact in the world based on where we are today, because now's the time. So we're incredibly proud.
Well, I suppose it feels very much so that it is more controversial not to speak out than controversial to speak out. And as rights holders, you've got that decision in many ways. And, Claire, just looking at you're three quite traditional organizations, as I say, what's the journey a rights holder has got to do to start speaking the language that Vivek is speaking, which is we have to take a stance, we have to take a position. What's the journey that an organization like yourselves with complexities actually and traditions?
Yeah, it is hugely complex. You're absolutely right. But I think our journey is going to be is effectively going to be turbocharged now. in a way that it wouldn't have been 10, 15, 20 years ago, because of the digitization of the world and how we're able to share much more quickly now, and movements happen much more organically, and they grow and they gain momentum. You know, in cricket, we've been really proud to be part of the women in sport movement, and really giving women in sport the same platform as the men. So I do think we can turbocharge it. That will be uncomfortable for some, I think, but I think we've got to go on a journey, and I don't think we're going to get it right every single time. But I think what we've got to do is try to get it right every single time. I think fans expect an awful lot, and they expect so much more of their sports now. They expect it of their brands, but fans expect it of their sport. And we need to, we can't rely on their fandom. We can't take it for granted. And I want to see players, athletes, and federations standing up for what they believe in, and using the huge platform that they have, the huge influence that they have to drive social change. And as federations, we should be seen to be supporting, not just seen to be supporting it, but actively be supporting it, even if it might make some of us uncomfortable. But we've got to go on that journey, and there's no doubt we're all on it. And you can see shifts that have happened in the space of 6 months. Look at it from an NFL perspective. They've been able to brave enough to stand up and say, okay, we might have got it wrong. And I applaud the bravery. It's better than staying stuck where they were. So I do think we're gonna, have to be bold and have to be brave, but we have to make change, and I think it's going to come quickly.
Well, sport's got some uncomfortable conversations to be had as we come forward, and it brings me to a kind of point that has become really self-evident at the moment. It seems that sport has always seen itself slightly above the supply chain. And as major corporations are out to ensure that their supply chains are akin to their values at the moment, it's always felt that sport has kind of been slightly aloof from those kind of conversations. But increasingly, is sport not the most evident part of a supply chain now for a major corporation? Why would you put your name anywhere at the moment where it isn't fully aligned with your values? I think this is a big conversation that sport has to have at the moment. Scott, what are your views about that at the moment, coming from World Sailing?
I think it's a balance. I think that I've certainly learned, and I know that World Sailing have learned an enormous amount from our partners and how they deliver their purpose messaging. And then also, I think, like I said before, that we become an enabler, and we can also form a sort of a micro example of what a large corporate is trying to do. So whether that's team selection on a boat and creating policy around gender equality, some of that I copy and paste from our partners' policies. And we're learning constantly from each other, and we're also exploring ways in which we can benefit from each other as well. So if for example there's a goal to use certain products, I'm probably best placed to understand where we could use that in our organization and how best to showcase that in the various ways. But I think it's collaboration, and then it's also understanding what your strong points are, but also how you can benefit from your partners on some of the weaker areas, for sure. And I think we are becoming more and more integral with our corporate partners' policies and communication.
I mean, Catherine, will it come to a point where there's this mutual exchange of information around how many women you have on your board, what's your diversity before you head into a relationship? Are those discussions that now are going to be unfeasible to have those conversations probably over 2 years ago? But now, you'd imagine the first meeting is an exchange of values proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're I think everything's going to be on the forefront. And fortunately, like I said, for the WTA, we those are definitely our principles in which we're based upon. So we're comfortable having these conversations. I know Claire mentioned that, you know, some of it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I think that in our environment, we're not scared of change. We're not scared of having difficult conversations, and just making sure that it's a safe space for everybody to feel like they can compete in on the competition side. So to your point, I think that behind the scenes is the same. We take the same approach behind the scenes.
So I've got one more question, and we're at a time where the industry has been is in a tough situation at the moment. You know, the sport's been on hold, etc. We've seen it very powerful out socially, though. It's had a very proud and loud voice at the moment. Just a quick answer from each of you. Are we missing sports value? Has sports values got up? As the world has shifted towards a more purpose-led world, isn't the value of sport growing rather than decreasing? Vivek, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, it absolutely, it continues to increase, right? The value of sports continues to increase because so many people look up to athletes and teams as inspiration, right? Not just in their personal lives, but in terms of their value system as well. I'll give you one very quick example, which is we hosted a virtual event called Take Your Child to Work Day because we felt that we couldn't let that opportunity pass. And in many cases, many of the teams that we work with, including the San Francisco 49ers, the New York Giants, right? Their athletes basically came to us as influencers and celebrities and worked with us and shared sort of what they were doing with kids. And so, even though there might not be sporting activity at the moment, there are lots of these types of opportunities, that we can see. And as brands, we look forward to engaging many of these relationships in this way.
Brilliant. Catherine, quick answer. Sport values going up, obviously.
Yeah, we definitely agree. I think the value is going up, but also the world is changing. So it's definitely a more digital world. Sports probably going to change over the next 18 months or so, whether it's going to be no fans, fewer fans, enhanced second screen experience. So beyond just the fan experience, I think we have an opportunity here to really make a change as we have a very captive audience as opportunities to get out and do things around the world are sort of, not, it's a little different today than it was 6 months ago. And so we have a captive audience, and this is now the time to take sport beyond just the competition.
Excellent. Claire, quick word from you on this one.
Yeah, very quick. I would echo everything that Catherine and Vivek have said, and I think the value of sport is going up. But I also think the importance of our values is also increasing, and it's bringing more balance to our world. It's been a very aggressively commercial world, rightly so, for the last decade, and I think it will continue to be so. But I just think there will be a bit more balance now with our values.
Lovely. Scott, 3 seconds you've got.
Yes. There you go.
Brilliant answer. Okay. Can I just say a huge thank you? Just the thing that stands out for me is this mutual relationship that's developing between rights holders that are starting to really understand what's being asked of them, that they do see the fact that they are a very visible part of the supply chain. I find that incredibly exciting moving forward. The desire not just to think about purpose, but impact, and what is going to be our genuine impact is very important. And that final piece, the most relevant piece that Claire intimated, these shared values, the meaningfulness, the relevance, the co-creation that Vivek talked about at the beginning is super exciting for our industry. Can I thank you all for a fantastic panel? You guys were absolutely superb. I really enjoyed that. Big round of applause for Catherine, Claire, Scott, and Vivek as well. Thank you, guys. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are now heading off to some workshops that we're going to have hosted by Think Beyond sessions, which is very exciting. And we have Third Wind Group with us as well. So as you'll see on the left, you get an opportunity to sign up on the left-hand side. So if you'd like to join a workshop where you can discuss and carry on, all of us are going to be there as well. So please take an opportunity to learn from Think Beyond the Third Wing Group, and we look forward to seeing you there. So all of you guys, good luck with your endeavours, and Vivek, thank you again on behalf of SAP, on behalf for SAP as well. Thank you.
Thank you.